The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. These words from 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard cut straight to the heart of one of humanity's greatest paradoxes. Here we are, watching a video about living authentically, when according to Kierkegaard himself, the very act of watching, reading, or hearing about life's deepest truths might be missing the point entirely. But stick with me, because this apparent contradiction opens up something profound about how we engage with existence itself. Who was Søren Kierkegaard? Before we dive deep into this quote, let's understand the man behind these words. Søren Kierkegaard lived from 1813 to 1855 in Copenhagen, Denmark. He's often called the father of existentialism, though he died decades before that term was even coined. Kierkegaard lived through a time of tremendous intellectual upheaval. The Enlightenment had promised that reason alone could solve humanity's greatest problems. Science was advancing rapidly. Philosophers like Hegel were constructing vast, systematic explanations of reality. Everything seemed to be getting more organized, more rational, more comprehensible. But Kierkegaard looked around and said, "Wait, something's missing." He saw people becoming increasingly detached from their own lives. They could analyze, categorize, and theorize about existence, but they seemed to have forgotten how to actually exist. They had become, in his words, spectators to their own lives rather than passionate participants. This wasn't just an intellectual problem for Kierkegaard, it was deeply personal. He struggled with profound melancholy, broke off his engagement to the woman he loved because he felt called to a solitary life of writing, and spent his days wandering the streets of Copenhagen, observing the human condition with both compassion and sharp critique. Breaking down the quote. Now let's examine this quote piece by piece, because every word matters. The highest and most beautiful things in life. Notice he doesn't say some things, or a few things. He's talking about the highest and most beautiful things. The peak experiences, the moments that make life worth living, the encounters with beauty, love, meaning, and transcendence that define our humanity, are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen. This might seem strange coming from someone who wrote prolifically and is now the subject of countless books, lectures, and yes, YouTube videos. But Kierkegaard isn't anti-intellectual. He's making a crucial distinction between second-hand and first-hand experience. Think about it this way. Can you really understand what it's like to fall in love by reading about it? Can you grasp the full meaning of grief by watching someone else mourn? Can you comprehend the joy of creation by simply observing artists at work? The answer is both yes and no. These secondary experiences can prepare us, inspire us, guide us, but they cannot substitute for the real thing. But, if one will, are to be lived. That phrase, if one will, is crucial. Kierkegaard is emphasizing choice, volition, personal commitment. Living authentically isn't something that just happens to you. It requires an act of will, a decision to engage fully with your own existence. This is where Kierkegaard's philosophy becomes radically personal. He's not interested in universal truths that apply to everyone equally. He's interested in the irreducible reality of individual existence. Your existence, my existence, the unique and unrepeatable experience of being this particular person in this particular moment. The spectator problem. Kierkegaard was deeply concerned about what we might call the spectator problem, the tendency to treat life as something to be observed rather than lived. In our current age, this problem has reached unprecedented levels. We live in what some call the documentation culture. We photograph our meals, live stream our experiences, curate our lives for social media. We can watch other people live through reality TV, follow influencers' daily routines, and consume endless content about how to live better, love deeper, work smarter. But Kierkegaard would ask, in all this watching and consuming, when do we actually live? He tells a parable about a man who becomes so fascinated by maps that he forgets to take the journey. The map is useful. It can show you the terrain, warn you of dangers, suggest routes. But the map is not the territory. Reading about adventure is not adventuring. Studying love is not loving. Analyzing meaning is not living meaningfully. This doesn't mean knowledge and reflection are worthless. Kierkegaard himself was extraordinarily well-read and intellectually sophisticated. The problem arises when we substitute the map for the journey, when we become so comfortable analyzing life that we forget to live it. Consider how this plays out in modern relationships. We have more resources than ever before about communication, psychology, and relationship dynamics. Dating apps promise to optimize our romantic lives. Self-help books offer formulas for lasting love. Yet many people report feeling more confused and disconnected than ever. Why? Perhaps because relationships cannot be optimized or formulated. They must be lived with all the risk, vulnerability, and uncertainty that entails. The courage to live. This brings us to one of Kierkegaard's central insights. Authentic living requires tremendous courage. It's actually safer to remain a spectator. When you're observing life rather than living it, you can't really fail. You can analyze others' mistakes without risking your own. You can maintain a sense of superiority, of being above the messy business of actual existence. But this safety comes at a profound cost. As Kierkegaard put it, the most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. Living authentically means accepting uncertainty. It means making choices without guarantees. It means embracing your own subjectivity rather than hiding behind supposedly objective analysis. Take the example of choosing a career. You can research endlessly, take aptitude tests, analyze job markets, and seek advice from others. All of this information can be valuable, but ultimately you have to choose, and that choice involves stepping into uncertainty. Kierkegaard would say that the highest and most beautiful thing isn't having the perfect career information, but actually living whichever path you choose with full commitment and authentic engagement. Or consider the decision to have children. No amount of reading parenting books, watching family vlogs, or analyzing child development research can truly prepare you for the reality of being a parent. The highest and most beautiful aspects of parenthood, the deep love, the profound responsibility, the daily acts of care, must be lived. This principle applies to spiritual life as well. Kierkegaard was a Christian, but he was deeply critical of what he called Christendom, the institutional, intellectual, socially acceptable version of Christianity that people could adopt without any real personal transformation. He argued that faith cannot be inherited, reasoned into, or socially acquired. It must be a personal leap, a risk taken by an individual who chooses to believe despite uncertainty. Living in the digital age, Kierkegaard's insights feel particularly relevant in our digital age. We live in unprecedented access to information, entertainment, and virtual experiences. We can tour museums online, attend virtual concerts, and maintain relationships through screens. These technologies offer incredible opportunities, but they also amplify the spectator problem Kierkegaard identified. It's possible to live an entirely curated, mediated existence, to experience the world primarily through devices and platforms designed by others. Social media, in particular, can turn our own lives into performance spaces where we become spectators to our own existence. We experience events partly for how they'll look online. We curate our image for an audience of other people who are also curating their images for us. Kierkegaard might ask, in all this curating and consuming, where is the actual living? This doesn't mean technology is inherently bad, or that we should reject digital tools entirely. But it does mean we need to be intentional about when we're using these tools to enhance our lived experience versus when we're using them to avoid it. The key is what Kierkegaard called passionate intensity, the willingness to engage deeply with your own existence rather than maintaining the comfortable distance of spectatorship. What would this look like practically? It might mean having conversations without documenting them, traveling to experience a place rather than to create content about it, pursuing relationships for their own sake rather than for how they appear to others, choosing activities based on personal meaning rather than social validation, accepting the messiness and uncertainty of real life rather than seeking the polished perfection of virtual alternatives. The paradox of this message. Here's where we come full circle to the paradox I mentioned at the beginning. If Kierkegaard is right that the highest and most beautiful things in life must be lived rather than heard about, then what are we doing here, talking about his ideas? Kierkegaard himself was aware of this paradox. He called his role that of a gadfly, someone whose job is to sting people into awareness, to provoke them out of complacency, to point towards something that ultimately cannot be pointed toward. His writings weren't meant to provide answers, but to create what he called divine unrest, a dissatisfaction with superficial living that might motivate someone to seek deeper engagement with their own existence. In this sense, the best response to this video wouldn't be to like, share, or even remember everything I've said. The best response would be to close your device and go live your actual life with greater intention and courage. The invitation to live. Kierkegaard's quote isn't just philosophical speculation, it's an invitation to step out of the comfortable role of spectator and into the risky, uncertain, beautiful work of actually living. This might mean different things for different people. For some, it might mean finally having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. For others, it might mean pursuing a creative project without worrying about the outcome. It might mean traveling somewhere that scares you, or staying put and finding depth in familiar surroundings. The common thread is a willingness to engage with your own existence rather than analyzing, consuming, or curating it from a distance. Kierkegaard believed that each person is called to become themselves, not some idealized version, not what others expect them to be, but their own irreplaceable self. This is perhaps the highest and most beautiful thing of all, the courage to live your own life fully, authentically, passionately. As you go forward from this video, I invite you to carry this question with you. Where in your life are you watching rather than living? Where are you consuming rather than creating? Where are you analyzing rather than experiencing? The answers will be uniquely yours because you are uniquely you. And that uniqueness, that irreplaceable quality of your individual existence, is precisely what Kierkegaard believed was most worth living. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived.